Welcome to the Online Strength Coach Podcast, episode 102. Today's question comes from PL700 from the YouTube comment section of the last episode. Firstly, we'll read some of the comments from the last show. Very good episode, Marc, from David Kutz. German volume training reminds me of the story Captain Kirk told when he first started training. He was the only teenager in a gym with lots of grown men, serious powerlifters, weightlifters, etc. They kept giving him ridiculous amounts of volume and weight to do, like 20 rep squats with 400 pounds. Kirk did everything they told him to and came back for more. It was only much later that they found out they didn't want a kid training in the gym, so they just programmed stupid workouts for him in the hope that he would get injured and just quit. Eventually they realised they weren't going to get rid of the kids and started training him correctly. It's a pretty cool story. And how powerlifting was way cooler in the 90s than it is right now. Okay, so today's topic is modifying a template like Boris Shieko, or how to train with Boris Shieko's program, but not train Boris Shieko's program. PL700 writes, next year I'm considering running Sheiko for the year. I like the frequency and overall multi-plan. However, I don't get along with lower reps anymore. Perhaps it's an age thing, but the past few years, especially whenever I delve into fives and lower shit hits the fan. Eights are my stable now, and generally I peak off a brief run of fives. My question for you, Marc, is can I possibly adapt Sheiko's percentages to account for higher reps? For example, if I was considering taking off 5% for every 2-3 reps added, I know this is a really shit question because you generally shouldn't mess with the program, but any ideas, cheers. Okay, so I think utilizing someone like Sheiko for your training is probably one of the best things you can do because he provides some form of block period structure, whereas programs that are only programs are like workouts like 531, which offers like a 1 month template, or something like Westside, which offers a week-long template. These programs don't really offer like a training program or something you can, like an annual plan or even a 3-month plan. Whereas something like Boris Shieko he'll have like a prep program, he has competition programs, he has peaking routines, he has a bunch of different routines available for 2, 3 and 4 days a week, all designed for powerlifting and all that can be utilized pretty much from a yearly fashion. Or you can download the Boris Shieko app and utilize fairly similar things in your training. Like you basically do targeted blocks of training that run into each other. So it's not just like a 4-week program or a 1-week template or a 1 workout program that you're trying to run into the ground. Now, one thing that you're going to need to appreciate with Boris Shieko's plans is it's not, although there are linear trends to the programs, and there are trends that gets overloaded in the programs, it comes from a different mechanism that you're probably used to in most programming. Boris Shieko pretty much relies on volume as his overload. Everything else is pretty much variance, so exercise selection is variance based off where your weaknesses lie or your skill deficiencies lie. So he'll choose pause squat for some people, whereas he might use like a band squat for other people, or he might front squat for other people, depending on where your issues in the lift lie. And that's where the exercise variation comes into it. Where he'll look at, or how he determines the load of a block, is the total lifts in the block, and then the heavy weeks are the weeks where they have the most volume. So for instance, if there's 600 lifts in the block or in the 4-week training plan, if the first week's 300 lifts in that week, and they'll all be varying percentages, then that's the heavy week. Then you'll get like a lighter week per se, where you maybe lift 100 lifts in that week, but the average intensity will be much higher. The average intensity in the first week will be much lower, but there may be lifts of 80 to 85% in that week, and then maybe there's also lifts of like 90% or an 80 to 90% in the second week, but the second week is in fact a lighter week, even though some of the sets might be heavier because the volume was down. And that's how he kind of goes from block to block. He will he will do like a heavier block for him will be like the higher total lifts in that month, and then the heavier weeks per se will be the ones with the more total lifts in the weeks. So he might just have a block where it's like there's an overload on week 1, and then week 2 to 4 like restitution weeks. So maybe it's like a higher average intensity on week 2 but a very low volume. Then he has like a moderate volume in week 3, and then like a lesser volume in week 4. But the overload's coming in week 1, and week 1's pretty much going to be a shit week, and then you have restitution for 3 weeks, and then in the next block he might load 2 weeks. He might load 2 and 4. He doesn't really follow a linear path when he loads. He tries everything. From what I can gather from Sheiko, is the more variation within the loading patterns, the more variation within the exercise selection, the better, because it allows the lifter to reach a level of conditioning where if there is a problem, like if they're sick or if they have a niggle or they have to take 4 or 5 days off training, they don't regress as quickly. Even if they have to take 2 or 3 weeks off training, they don't regress as quickly. Whereas in like a linear program or a linear training program, you're basically just on a peaking cycle. So if you missed a week out of 5 weeks in a peaking cycle, you're pretty much fucked. You need to start back at volume, or you need to start the peaking cycle again. If you miss like a week's training in the peaking cycle, you can't just pick it up again. So that's like, I just kind of had that first bit of talk just so you can understand where you can see the common threads coming through, like the Boris Shieko routine. Now, if you strip Boris Shieko's routine down to its kind of bare essentials, or to like a simplified version of it, what you're looking at is you're going to need, so it's going to fluctuate, so the volume and intensities are going to fluctuate week to week. So typically what I do now with my training plans is I'll try to have like a high volume week with a lower intensity. Next week will be higher average intensity with lower volume, and I'll just flip-flop. And typically I'll have like a fairly linear trend through it. So week 1 will be the highest volume, week 3 will be the second highest volume, week 2 will be the second highest intensity, and week 4 will be the highest intensity, and the volume will undulate, if you will, from week 1 to 4, and the intensity will mirror that undulation. So when volume is high, intensity is high. And I find that to be a very, very useful way of programming, something I pretty much just took from Boris. I found his programs I found them difficult to try and replicate per se. I just kind of took away the principles, try to work them into my own kind of training or my own kind of programming. I'm not trying to utilize the same volumes he utilize the same. There's a few more things I took away was like maybe having like 4 days a week. One day is like squat, bench, squat. Next day is deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift. And this day off and repeating that. That's also something I've used has worked fairly well. But there's more what I'm trying to say is that you want to take out the principles from the programs, and then if you want to adapt them, you can kind of change them to what you're doing. What I would say is like there's nothing wrong with low reps. It's more the intensity. So from what you're talking about, or what you seem to be saying is when you use lower rep sets, obviously the intensity was high, but there's no reason like you could do 3 sets of 8 at 60%, say, and then obviously that's working for you quite well, which is great. But there's no reason why 8 sets of 3 at the exact same percentage is not going to have the same or confer the same benefit to you. Like the intensity, the average intensity and the total reps of those two workouts are the exact same. If anything, the 8 sets of 3 is a slightly less intense workout because it's split the volume up, so there's less inter-set fatigue. So when you do like a heavy set of 10, let's say 3 sets of 10 at 70%. 30, so 10 sets of 3 at 70% is a pretty easy workout. Like, still like some workout that will have a confer training benefit. It's going to provide some form of overload. And in the case of a week where you're using a higher frequency of lifting, so if you're squatting 3 to 4 times a week and this is just one of your workouts, then you're definitely going to confer some kind of overload. But when we're talking about utilizing 3 sets of 10 versus 10 sets of 3 sets of 10, what happens is the first set's generally fine. We accumulate a fair bit of fatigue. Second set's a lot more difficult because of fatigue accumulated from the last set. And then the last set would be very, very difficult, probably. 3 sets of 10. At 3 sets of 10 at 70%, just due to the accumulation of fatigue from set to set. So when we do a set of 10, every rep we do past the set of 3 that we would have done 10 sets of 3, we're doing it in a more fatigued state. And size principles just doesn't work for... size principle is that the higher of the velocity of contraction or the higher the force contraction, the more motor units or the larger motor units we're going to recruit, and the more motor fibers we recruit as a result. This is a lot of the rationale for why speed athletes or power athletes should train with high percentage loads, like they should train at like 90% plus loads, because we're utilizing high threshold motor units or fast twitch muscle fibers, and the rationale is that confers a greater benefit than doing like a 5x5, 70% or whatever. However, as lifters, this is not really our concern. When we do 3 sets of 10, what happens is over that set of 10, fatigue accumulates. So the muscle fibers that we utilize, or the motor units that we recruit to do those first 3 reps, fatigue. As such, as the set goes on, fatigue builds, and those motor units don't really have the force capacity anymore to move that weight, so we end up recruiting higher threshold motor units. It's possible to take a set from failure and recruit the high threshold motor units, to recruit your type 2As, your type 2Xs to move the weight if you take yourself to complete concentric failure. However, we utilize them in another manner that won't confer the speed benefit that we want, so it's maybe not necessarily what you want to be doing for strength training or for speed training. So basically what I'm trying to say is there's nothing inherently wrong with lower rep sets, but what I'm inferring you're probably feeling is lower reps at higher intensities are probably messing with you. So what you could do with like a Boris Shieko routine, rather than trying to change everything completely, is you could look at the cycle and maybe just reduce the average intensity of the workout. So if you find there's a workout, say, where it's maybe 2 sets of 6 at 60%, 2 sets of 6 at 65%, 2 sets of 4 70%, 2 by 3 at 80%, and 1 by 2 at 90%. Maybe what you do is you don't do the 1 by 2 at 90%, maybe you do 1 set of 3 at 80%, and then maybe you do a couple more sets of 3 to 4 reps or 5 to 6 reps at lesser percentages. And maybe what you do is you just try dip, maybe do like a higher intensity set every now and again, or if this is making sense, rather than just trying to think, well, what I do is I don't really like doing 3s and 2s because I feel like I get beat up, or my joints get beat up because the weight's heavy. Just don't lift the heavy weight, basically. Keep the volumes reasonably high, which you're going to have on Sheiko, and just don't dip into those higher percentages. Don't maybe just limit yourself to 85% at an absolute max, and then save those heavier lifts for meets or max attempts or whatever you're doing. You will get stronger on a Boris Shieko inspired routine or Boris Shieko's routines without going over 85%. Quite a lot of his routines don't go over 85%, and if they do, it'll be for like a single here or a double there. You're not going to do like 5x5 at 85%. He doesn't do that kind of training. Most of his, he said the best average percentage for a powerlifter was like 68 to 72% average intensity was the most optimal intensity for producing gains in a powerlifter. Obviously the volumes need to reflect that and be higher. However, you will get stronger on the routine. What I would do from what you're saying is I would just limit the amount of volume having over 85%. And maybe if you track this a bit better, or you get more, if you plan it out such, and you can see that with this workout I got a niggle here, I got this here, I'm knees didn't feel great here, then you can look and maybe there's 6 reps over 80%. Maybe if we reduce that to 4 reps over 80% or 3 reps over 80%, then the workout's fine. And we're still getting that practice, although not as much practice, with the higher percentage weights, so that our skill specific, or our powerlifting skill set, or our maximal, our ability to max, or our ability to lift above 90%, we are practicing elements of that, which of course is essential as a powerlifter to be better at it, but something we want to do sparingly. Not something you want to do week in, week out, because you will get hurt doing it. or you will, if you don't get hurt, you will certainly overreach, and you will find that within about 2 or 3 weeks you'll start going backwards, and you start feeling a lot worse and a lot worse recovered. Hopefully that's helpful. I don't think there's any real surefire or easy way of taking a Boris Shieko routine and just adapting it, adding more reps. There's no real surefire way of doing that. Hopefully that's the conversation is kind of giving you an appreciation for why that is the case, and maybe helps you to think about your training in a bit less of a dichotomy, more of a what's the percentage I'm lifting at rather than the reps I'm lifting at. Because there's nothing wrong with rep ranges. It's just how they're applied, same as everything in life. If they're applied incorrectly, or if they're applied in a manner that isn't conducive to you or your body, then of course you're not going to get on with them. So hopefully this helped you understand why that might be the case. Thank you very much for listening. I've been Marc as always. If you'd like to catch me on the line, you can check me out at castironstrength.com. It's my own personal blog. If you want to check out my online coaching or more powerlifting related content, please check out onlinestrengthcoach.com. Of course, the YouTube is Speed Power Fitness on YouTube. If you'd like to get in contact for whatever reason, questions, comments, services you'd like to inquire about, my email is speedpowerperformance@gmail.com. Any questions you'd like to answer on the podcast, please leave a comment on YouTube or shoot me an email. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Marc, and I'll catch you in episode 103 of the Online Strength Coach podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.